Welcome to another edition of the EMS Wizard
Hey, Mark,
podcast.
I'm back.
Hey,
Just so you know, Walter is back.
Walter is back.
He was gone. The wings, but he's back.
He is back.
Walter's with us. That's awesome.
I don't. No. I thought this was my turn to interrupt. So, John, you just need to. It's Terry Sheehy's turn. I'm on the mic. Take a back seat and just relax because, just look through the binoculars and see what's up.
My wedding ring is on camera.
So is mine.
Hey,
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's nice. How you have that. That's
Walter,
interesting.
Mine's off tonight. Sorry.
Hmm?
My wife is
Walter's-
downstairs. My wife is downstairs. She doesn't get salty if I don't wear it.
Walter's having problems, y'all. Y'all need to pray for him. There's problems going on in the Meads household.
If you feel you need to pray, you probably need to pray for the Wilsons as well.
All right, guys.
Uh-oh.
Let's reel it in.
Oh.
Let's reel it in.
Sorry, Antwan.
Antwan has done put y'all to shame. Bring it back in.
That's what he do.
I'm here.
Look, Antwan, you're here. Look, that's my line.
welcome, Antwan. Welcome to the group.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Okay, so we're going to have a ton of great conversation tonight. We have the Antwan Brown with us tonight. He is the Director of Emergency Services for Edgecombe County in North
Edgecombe.
Carolina.
Edgecombe.
Welcome,
in the
Antwan.
halls.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So let's start out. Just kind of tell us a little bit about who you are, where you came from, kind of how you come up to where you are, where you're the Director of Emergency Services.
Yeah. So, born and raised in Edgecombe County. Kind of lived there all through elementary, middle, high school. My dad was in the military, so I traveled across a little bit of Texas and New York living, Kentucky living, so on and so forth. Came back to Edgecombe County, kind of in high school, to where I could go to Tarboro High. I graduated from Tarboro High, and just kind of moved on up from there. So I went to college at our North Carolina Wesleyan College in Rocky Mount, got an undergrad in education, and pretty much went, So went on from there. EMS career kind of started at some point while I was in undergrad, but it all seemed to work out for me.
Well, what made you go from EMS or teaching? I mean, that seems like two different aspects. I mean, how are those two even related? You know, you're talking about undergrad and education, and then you're talking about EMS as well. How did those two even have anything to do with each other?
Yeah, so I fell into EMS. I wasn't one of those folks that kind of knew straight out of high school that's something that they wanted to do. So for me, I had a plan, right? My plan kind of was to go into education and be a teacher, which I did do for a little while. But of course, I was kind of pulled back to my true passion, I think. And so kind of through all of that experience, I think it kind of placed me where I am now, for sure.
Did one feed the other? I mean, like, did you start like which did you do first? I mean, did you grow up as a kid wanting to be a teacher, and then what happened to make EMS even come into the picture?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So actually, I did grow up wanting to be a teacher. And so I remember starting to take some classes at Wesleyan, kind of undergrad on campus. And I kind of found out there was like this EMT offering, right? They kind of had some posters up on the university campus. I was like, what is that all about? Let's kind of check that out. And so I did. I went and showed up at the local community college in Edgecombe for a night class, and it was 3 people in the class, and that was including me. And so basically, I went and took the class. I went to college during the day, and then I drove to Tarboro at night twice a week to take the EMT class, and that kind of, kind of just took off. Kind of fell in love with it from there.
Antwan, I know you've got some fire service background as well. So where does that fall in with everything for you?
Yeah, I'm a complicated individual, just a little bit, right?
Yes. Things that have been said about Antwan Brown.
The best of all worlds, the Antwan Brown. So so the fire service started, and that was a high school thing, and so I must admit that the fire service probably was my first love before I kind of fell into EMS. And so as a junior firefighter, right, in high school, and living in the Princeville community, I thought it was important to begin kind of my, my passion of giving back and serving my own. And so what better way to do that than through the volunteer fire service? So I joined up. Of course, the grunt work, I was young, I was able to do it, I was fit, enjoyed kind of the adrenaline rush, if you will. And so that kind of was an initial exposure kind of to some of this world of EMS, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean it does, and when you left the fire service, which I wouldn't quite say that you left it, since Edgecombe Emergency Services, you've got the fire marshal's office, and you're the fire marshal for the county, but you were the chief of Princeville Fire Department, and that's a pretty, not that being emergency services director isn't an accomplishment, but being a fire chief, that's a pretty tough thing too. So any lessons that you would say that from the fire service that roll into EMS and your job now?
Absolutely. I think the fire service kind of attributed a lot to kind of my leadership style, and really kind of taps into, it's all essentially, it's all the same work. We're all public servants. We all, kind of get in this vehicle, right? And we go off and kind of provide a service, and then we come back. So a lot of it is very similar in a lot of ways. But it's also different. And so I was talking to someone the other day, and I was speaking of, when I was the fire chief and kind of matriculating up in the fire department, I was able to kind of, say things, because there were a lot of guys. Innately, we didn't have females in the department. And so even the way I addressed them, and I corrected action, or I kind of gave direction, was completely different than kind of my approach now in the EMS world, especially considering all types of people who kind of serve in the EMS profession. So definitely, for sure, it's definitely kind of guided the path that I'm in now.
Did something happen in education that made you say, I'm going to do EMS full time? I know you and I was fortunate enough to work with you for many years, working with Edgecombe Rescue back when it was a rescue squad. And I think, if I remember, you went back and forth with what you were going to do, and you ended up being in the school system, and now you returned. Me and you come back to help set up what became Edgecombe County EMS, and you ascended on up to be the director there. But what was that turning point to say, I'm gonna step away from education and follow this path?
Yeah, so I was kind of dabbling back and forth, really trying to figure out what was it that was really my passion, and so. What really was the breaking point for me, because I finished college, and I was not working as an educator at that point, because I was working as a EMT at the restaurant, like you alluded to, John. And so working there, and then eventually I went and got my intermediate, which was an advanced EMT, and then I got my paramedic shortly thereafter in 2012. And so from that point, I began working on the truck, making good money, making a difference, really feeling good about myself. And what was really the turning point was a lot of kind of bad calls, if you will, the black cloud, quote unquote, as we kind of hear of it. And it kind of reflects on kind of my position as a leader, because I didn't have, it wasn't back then. It wasn't a lot of support for young EMS professionals who have to endure things in life that they've never been exposed to. And so one of my biggest ones was my partner coded on me. And that was really the turning point that kind of kicked out the door. So we had worked together the night before, had run some horrible calls for a 20-year-old as a paramedic, but he was a veteran intermediate for sure. Dwight Jefferson was his name. And so we ran calls all night. We came back the next morning. Well, essentially what happened was his relief had arrived, mine had not. And we got and so he was staying at the station to finish up some reports, where I got toned out to like a bleeding call, hemorrhage call, at a local dialysis center. And so, the good Lord knows all. And so we never get canceled from those types of calls, right? And so we got about halfway there with his relief partner. And what happened, we got canceled. And so I was like, okay, good. I can make it back to the station. to get off, right? This never happens, but it did. And then no sooner than we almost made it back to the station, very hysterically, I could hear over the radio what they were calling, basically saying that my partner was down and he was in full cardiac arrest when we arrived. He had a massive MI shortly thereafter shift. And so just arriving and having to work him, and then after that whole experience, that was my time to step away. And I did for a little while, and slowly but surely I was able to kind of work myself back into it.
I mean, that's Antwan, that you kind of not, I think the sales out of all of our faces, except for John, who knew that. And I couldn't even begin to imagine. I don't think anybody has any shame in that game, that you have something like that, you have to step away. When I talk with folks at some other agencies, they talk about peer support, they talk about mental health, and hearing your story, what does that mean to you? What is something that you do to work with your folks in terms of that peer support and that mental health, having experienced what you did?
Absolutely. I think conveying the passion for it, and just really making sure that protocols and procedures are in place to support staff. I think it's so much easier to receive from someone who has, similar walked through similar experiences. And so really just being extremely responsive to the mental health state of my EMS employees, for sure. All of my employees that work in emergency services, because unfortunately the work we do is not easy, and we see things that can be extremely traumatizing if not handled correctly. Could really lead to a bad space.
So, Antwan, is that when you actually left and went to the school system for a little while?
Right, I did. Yeah, I did. And I left and went to the schools for about 7 years. And it took me, I stayed out for maybe 10 months of just like not working EMS at all. Mm-hmm. And then slowly but surely I started to, start back to pick up shifts and kind of, reintroduce myself to the profession again. Because of course, at this point, I was 20 years old when I got my paramedic. And so, that was extremely young. And so at this point I was maybe 21 and I had other options. And so I kind of, it was like not a fail safe, but I knew that I had, if I went back into EMS and I continued to have similar experiences, then I would be safe, right? So teaching kind of what was my safety. And although I enjoyed it, EMS really was what was my passion. And so being able to get back to that has been a joy for sure.
How would you recommend someone that potentially would be in that same boat today? How would you recommend them to be able to help get themselves through it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really think, just staying true to yourself, communicating with those, that you trust, not being afraid to be vulnerable, I think is important. And just, having a strong network for sure, to be able to support you through it. We all go through it inevitably. The work that is done for sure is not easy. And so really kind of building your building your safety within the process and people that you have is important.
I think it really speaks well of Dwight that you're able to rebound, to go through something traumatic like that, go through, you live out your childhood dream to do something, and then there's got to be a little bit of that, coming back and saying, I'm going to overcome the struggles that I had with EMS and stepping away, and I've done my dream. And now you're like the epitome of that. You came back. You came back as a paramedic. You worked up the chain. For a while, you were supervisor. You was a training officer. And then lo and behold, you end up, the director there. And I think Dwight probably had, that just in the back of your mind, knowing you like I do, that's a motivator for you to honor, your partner and go through that. And I think that's a little bit about what Walter was talking about is can that be, it's not a dead end. these things and I think people struggle with that today. They have an issue, they go through something, and they think it's a dead end. And you're a good example of it's not necessarily, a dead end. You can continue on forward.
Right. With a little bit of motivation, perseverance, staying true to who you are, you can write the end to the story for sure.
Nice. Mark, you do a similar role in Duplin County as Antwan does. And I look at Antwan, I always say he has these multiple hats he wears, and Mark wears multiple hats where he's at in Dublin County. And so, and so that's the thing that fascinates me is I never have to get into that situation. I'm an EMS guy, and that's what I know. You get outside of EMS, and that's it. I'm done with or whatever. So I love hearing you, Antwan, talk about these different aspects of how you view things from the fire service, and Mark's done the same, with things like that. So
it's not all that different. Like the things we do from day to day and the things that we got to think about and consider from day to day, they're not all really that different. I mean, other than the fact that, the paramedics will be holding the IV catheter and the firefighters will be holding the hose. Other than the little small details like that, it's really not quite that different. The responsibilities are different. Now I can also, kind of admit to the fact that, EMS as a profession is probably, like I spoke of before, EMS is probably in that toddler phase of a profession, whereas the fire service is, matured and grown. Law enforcement has matured and grown. They kind of worked out a lot of the things. We're still kind of stumbling and learning how to walk, right? So,
right,
Antwan, think about, shut up, John. Antwan, thinking back, as a director of emergency services, coming up through the ranks and accomplishing everything that you've accomplished, knowing what you know now, what would you tell paramedic Brown while he was still on the truck working from day to day? What would be some advice you would give paramedic Brown looking back?
Yeah, that's sure. I think what I would I would definitely tell myself, you don't have to have it all figured out, right? You can you can take a moment, you can take time and breathe, embrace it all, right? I think I've done a pretty good job to get me where I am now, but I definitely would look back and just say, hey, dude, take a chill. It's fine. You're good. Keep pushing, keep exploring, and really keep pulling on knowledge. And those that you encounter from the more seasoned folks for sure.
What type of struggles did you see yourself? Did you have any as you were coming up through? And again, I go back to this academic background, clear path. Antwan Brown wants to be a teacher. And somehow the passion of EMS took over and got you in that. And it sounds like it may have sparked from being a firefighter. Did you face any struggles in that? Other than internally trying to say, man, where do these two places collide? The first question I'd ask is what type of struggles did you have? And do you think those are common struggles as a leader that you see other people having? And if so, how do what advice can you give for people to overcome those?
Yeah, I think it's one of the main struggles I had was really identifying with someone that looks like me. Okay. A lot of my encounters in EMS, especially back then, was really being able to connect, being able to relate, and find someone that looked like me, to be able to kind of show me what this journey looked like. I did not have that initially, but of course, moving along, I was able to connect, with mentors. Vincent Hunter is one of them for sure. Mm-hmm. That knew the trade, knew what needed to happen, and I was able to have honest conversations with for sure, and not put me in a position where I felt like maybe I was, kind of being judged, right? Implicitly judged.
So, Antwan, where you're talking about coming into the industry and saying, hey, there's not somebody who looks like me. There's not somebody who has that same background as me. Edgecombe County, it's one of my favorite places. I love all 100 counties in North Carolina. Edgecombe has a really special place in my heart with some of the things that John and I have done there, some of the experiences and the things that I've been able to see career firsts during my time in Edgecombe. And you guys have something pretty interesting in where you're one of the newest county EMS agencies in the state of North Carolina. And so tell me, what does that look like? How are some of those things in terms of that mentoring with all of these young folks, these young ladies and gentlemen? They definitely are have to be looking up to you and your leadership team. So tell me a little bit what that looks like. How do you stand up an EMS agency?
Yeah, so we started county run January 21 of 2021. At that point in time, I was not director. I was a shift captain. And so I was charged with leading a group of individuals, to manage day-to-day operations. From that, kind of like you said, that was huge. I was with the rescue squad for 11 years, which was, privately run to provide ambulance services in the county. And then all of a sudden we become this county run entity, and what we think, hey, is a light switch flip and everything is perfect. We quickly understood to not be the case at all. As a matter of fact, when we switched over at 7 a.m. on January 21st, 2021, nothing changed, to be honest. The trucks were still the same. The stations were still the same. A lot of the dispatch procedures, for sure, they all were still the same. And so we kind of pumped up this big thing that was happening, just to kind of realize that we're still in the same place. And so I think I said all that to say, it's definitely been a process for sure. Learning local government procedures, really trying to establish a culture within the agency that would put us in a position to really be able to continue to attract, but also retain employees who really have a heart to be in Edgecombe County. Of course, we're east of 95, so our competition for sure is all the same, and we're amongst some of the the struggles of many EMS agencies today when it comes down to equipment and pay, for sure. But we definitely make great strides in those areas, and I'm very proud of where we are today. One thing that has been a benefit is that I am a younger leader in the EMS profession, and so being able to really relate to some of the younger staff, or develop procedures or practices, or the use of technology, things that the younger folks kind of connect with, has really been important. Streams of communication has really helped.
And I think that's something that stands out to me is, you're looking at a young service, you're looking at a young emergency services director in there. It's a diverse system coming in as a minority. Talk a little bit about your relationship as all of these things, having to develop a relationship with the county manager and the politics that is local government EMS. When you're going from, I was there with you, I knew what it was like to be in that rescue squad based system that ran, and it had to transition to that local government model. And that you had relationships being the fire chief of Princeville when you were there. So from a leader standpoint, if I'm looking up to you, give us some tips, man. How do you establish those relationships?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is kind of really going back to really being passionate about the work that you're doing. I think passion can convey and really convince any group of people that you have to stand before. And so kind of going back to the fire service, a lot of my experiences as the fire chief of Princeville Fire Department really helped me in this role, from dealing with a lot of natural disasters. And that was kind of my my way into dealing with the emergency management functions that I now oversee as well. Princeville is a community that floods, of course, during winter weather for sure, whether it be, a hurricane or flash flooding. And so really being a state of readiness to respond to those things was huge. We don't have many resources. And so it's all hands on deck. So from dealing with our local, our town elected officials, and having to communicate to the town manager and do presentations and kind of advocate, where I always tell them one of the biggest things I have to do now is I have to educate before I can even advocate. What I find myself doing is that, hey, these folks don't know about the service that we do. They have no idea. And so I find joy in being able to bring in my educational training to be able to advocate for the profession that we're in, because a lot of times if they don't know, people are not willing to kind of go for things to help promote change. And so if I do a really good job of trying to educate them on, hey, this is why we're doing what we're doing and what the need is, then they seem to be more receptive to support whatever it is that needs to be happening. And of course, that translates over to my position now. The rescue squad was kind of a hands-off service, kind of through the lens of the county. So, hey, rescue squad, you guys take this, provide a service. We'll support you as best we can, kind of hands-off. January 21, we're now a county-run service, and it's all hands on deck, all inclusive. And so a lot of that experience has been really just kind of, working through the channels of, some of the needs, right? And I will say they have been responsive. I think the clear communication and really the education, the advocacy really pays off for us.
So Antwan, I have to ask, like you kind of got into EMS about the same time I did, and we're two kind of younger leaders in our profession, right?
Oh, really?
So,
You're gonna take a shot like that? I mean, Terry's old, Walter's old.
You guys are old. We know. It's okay. You don't have to bring it up. I wasn't going to bring it up. You brought it up. I wasn't going to say anything.
They're seasoned.
The two young guys amongst the seasoned crowd in the podcast today.
The white pepper.
Oh gosh, here we go. So Antwan, tell me what you think about how EMS is formulated today. Y'all been through a lot of transition to the local government side of things, and how do you feel like EMS is the status of EMS is today, and what do you see in the future, like 5-10 years down the road?
Yeah, are you speaking Edgecombe specific or just as a profession in a whole?
You can hit on both. That's
okay.
Cool.
Yeah, so I think Edgecombe County, we are well on our way. I think we're getting folks in position. Part of what I immediately recognized, especially when I took the position as a director, and I had to kind of settle myself with, is that there are some people who are going to kind of embrace this and kind of go along this journey with me, and there are others who, unfortunately, as John C. Wilson says best, they're kind of casualties of war, right? So we already know before we even go into war that unfortunately there are some people that are not going to be able to that are not going to go with us. And so I had to kind of come from a place, because I knew a lot of people, worked with a lot of people in the rescue squad that were translating over to county run EMS that unfortunately I knew would not still be with us today. And that held very true. But really putting us in a position to really embrace some of the other people who had a lot to bring to Edgecombe County and really kind of position us for that. I would say now in Edgecombe County, we've went from being a service that handled about 4,000 non-emergency transports in our county solely by us. There wasn't any other non-emergency franchise organization in our county, and to now being in a position where, with COVID and other things that kind of affect many agencies, we've been able to prove really some of the working conditions of our staff as a whole, and so that's been really important to me for sure. And I think really getting our agency to really 21st century EMS, right, as a profession. I can remember, probably 3 or 4 years ago, we were still doing paper charts. And so there was a lot of practices that we had that were outdated.
Wow.
And I don't think that is, I don't think that it's directed towards any specific person or persons that's responsible for it. But one of the the greatest challenges and successes that we've had is really modernizing the EMS system in Edgecombe. The citizens here in Edgecombe deserve just as a profound EMS system as citizens across the state and nation.
So modernizing EMS overall. So we should also modernize the ability to press the record button whenever it's really needed.
Some people might say that. Some people might. Antwan, I know John, don't stop hating yourself for everything that you aren't. Start loving yourself for everything that you are. Antwan, I've been wrestling with that. I know our time is starting to draw to an end here. I've been wrestling. Do I ask this question or not? And so my heart says to ask it. Do you have a second best friend?
Amongst the group?
No. Just in general. Like, do you have it? I mean, you have a best friend.
I do.
Do you have a second best friend?
I don't.
Huh.
Terry.
I don't.
Terry.
Antwan.
I cannot believe he said it again.
I'm accepting applications though.
Oh, okay.
Didn't you meet Keith at the conference?
What guy? Who's Keith? I never. Nobody
knows Keith.
Yeah.
Keith?
You're not wrong.
Keith didn't go to Texas to the conference.
There's a lot of good things. Yet another thing Antwan and I have in common: our time in Texas.
You know what's not in Edgecombe County? Trains.
But actually, they are.
No.
At the county line.
Nah, that's Nash County. That's Nash. Get Scott Strufy. Let's ask him. We'll ask Strufy. There's a train wreck.
He's
getting
his hair done. His hair is not in the rain.
Whose is it?